Hey, Deanna. I've mentioned this before, but I think it's super valuable to include your written observations and reactions to the assignment. It tells me so much. It's really, really important. It really gives me to a very high degree, an understanding of where you're at in the developmental process and your design methodology, conceptual development and execution, along with problems therein. So I was really glad to see this nice detailed written accompaniment to your work. Now we'll take a look at this, but I want to address some of your writing first. So what do we have? If I catch anything, I searched one of the poker feeling. I read through this once, and there's a couple of key points here I wanted to address. So I chose this couple of ways to keep the amount of text short and to the point. I agree. Simplicity works in Advert. That's why I left those links. I've left a few links now that are pointing to research and magazine design. And one of them is, time and time again, research shows that the simplicity in magazine design ads is superior to complexity. And it has to do with the amount of reaction time that there is between the time the viewer looks at the ad and decides whether they're going to stay on the page or not. Quite often, a complex ad causes the viewer to turn the page quite more quickly than they otherwise would. Okay. And I think that this is a great example of simplicity in design, and I appreciate that. So, okay, good typography. I want to address that in a second. Fairly new. I mean, this is fantastic work for somebody who's brand new to Photoshop and Illustrator. So be proud. I am. I mean, I'm proud of you for being basically a brand new user. I think you're doing some really interesting things. Plus, you have a good eye for composition. So good job there. Find the professor's tutorials helpful. And that's why they're there. Absolutely. I mean, they walk you through everything. And then once you get that under your belt, you can start to experiment and kind of take things off on your own direction in terms of your design decisions. So the tutorials are very, very important. I agree. Then you're saying that you search YouTube. And I just want to mention one thing about YouTube. YouTube is great for taking tutorials. It's fantastic. The caveat for YouTube is beware of the design advice you get from YouTube. And the only reason I say that is because you do not know the credentials of the person who's giving said advice. So following tutorials is one thing. Following advice is another. I mean, I've quite often gone through tutorials on YouTube where the tutorial is excellent, but then the user gives this really horrible design advice. So I quite often, whenever I see or hear a design student talking about YouTube, I quite often share that in that caveat that you don't know the credentials of the person who created the video. Therefore, beware of design advice. If lynda.com, on the other hand, I don't know if you use lynda.com at all, but I think it's called LinkedIn Learning now. But that is something different. That forum, that platform has just got industry-wide experts. So the design advice in something like that, in more of a kind of a, what's the word I'm looking for? This kind of a dedicated design site where you know that the users have credentials, and that's where you can get your design advice. I hope that makes sense. Let me know if not, I'll be glad to clarify. So enough of that. Let's go and take a look at the work. I think the ad is excellent. I do, and for those of you who are watching along this video, I have your ad up. Where is it? I'm looking at that, and I have your ad. Oh, there it is, right there. Okay, so now those of you who are following along with this video. This particular ad Deanna's ad seems a little washed out in this rendering. And this is a JPEG rendering, but I saw this before, and it does have great contrast. So that's something that I think should be mentioned for those who maybe want to mention or talk about the lack of contrast in the image itself. For some reason, it's rendered very strangely, but I can assure you I've seen this ad and contrast is ample. So the ad is excellent, and then the wonderful thing about the ad is the simplicity of the ad. So where do we go from here? I think there's the headline, that's Arial bold, right? Arial bold italic. That word at that's assembled in Arial regular. So you want that to be part of the subhead, and that is Arial bold italic. Okay, I think the relationship between the headline and the subhead is a little bit lacking in really definitive hierarchy. that reason, I recommend that you increase the size of the headline a little bit and then keep the subhead where it's at. Also, take that whole, I would also recommend increasing the space between the headline and the subhead, just a few pixels, not much at all. Then take that whole typographic composition and move it down just a little bit. I think it's a little high in the composition. Move it down, watch my cursor, whoops, something like right about there as your headline subhead combination. Okay, now typically I am not a fan of center align type. I use it very, very rarely, but in some cases I think it warrants center align type. This is one because of this typographic configuration over here. I don't think left alignment would work well with this. Conversely, well, I'll talk about the address contact information area in a second. Okay, so great job, really great experimentation here on this typography. One thing you're going to notice is this, and I'm going to make this recommendation. I think you're just going to be blown away at how this is going to improve the harmony of the ad. But instead of using pure white for the headline and subhead, you may consider taking your eyedrop tool, coming down here and sampling one of these off-white colors from the waves and assemble that. Right now, I think the headline advances too much, being that it's pure white. It advances too much in the composition. While this black doesn't, it just seems to kind of recede in the composition a little bit. And I think that creates this kind of weird kind of depth of field juxtaposition that is a little bit uncomfortable. We can rectify that very easily by, instead of using pure white for the headline subhead combination, go ahead and sample one of these colors over here. And then, or use, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say and or, I should say or use one of the colors, maybe this color here for the headline subhead combination. Try it, see what happens, maybe even the purple. And I think the same thing over here. Instead of black, let's try that purple right there. See how it works for you. I think at that point, I think that the logo is a little bit too large. Watch my cursor, something like this for the logo. And the only reason I say that is because I think there's some competition going on between the logo and this typographic composition right here. Now the logo, and you're probably thinking right now, but wait a second, shouldn't the logo take precedence since it's branding the client? And that is a good thought. I know you were thinking that, were you? And that's a great thought, it is. However, we reinforce branding simply by the placement of the logo, this is a smart move right here, putting the logo right here, because we look at compositions. We start any composition up here. We move across and down the page like we read a book, right? Therefore, the logical place to enter any composition is right up here. That's valuable real estate. The logical place to exit the composition for a viewer is right down here. That's very valuable real estate. We're going to take advantage of that and exploit that real estate by placing the logo there to reinforce branding as the viewer exits the page. That's called exit strategy, and it's very effective. However, I think the logo is a little too large. So let's reduce. Again, watch my cursor, something like that for the logo. At that point, I'm not feeling the center alignment on the contact info. That I would just go ahead and left align that. Okay, and that's it. I think other than that, you're just beautiful. By the way, folks, those of you who are watching along saying, well, wait a second, this doesn't have the masked image from assignment 2-1, but it does. It's the couple right here. That's good work. I mean, when I looked at this, the first time I looked at this, I was like, oh, wait a second, where's the masked image? And then I was like, I looked at it again, I go, oh, that can't be the masked image. I mean, that just looks like it's part of the composition. So I went, I looked at your layer structure. Sure enough, that's the masked image. So that's outstanding work right there. So that's excellent. Okay, those are my recommendations. I'd like to see you make those changes. They could very well drive some decisions based on the banner ad. So make those decisions. I would say right now, I probably would say don't expect to use this typographic composition in the banner ad. It's going to be really small. You'll see when you get there. You'll know exactly. It's going to be really small, and it probably won't work based on the size of the document size for the banner ad itself. Okay, so just think about that moving forward. And as I said, I'd like to see the changes recommended in this video. And if you have any questions, let me know. But if you want to resubmit, go ahead. and I'll make comments. Otherwise, I'd like to see these working towards the final rendering of the magazine. All right, great job. Thank you very much.